Okay, so some things that I don't understand about the O'Keefe family is why they're so convinced that Karen Reed did it when all the evidence says otherwise. All the true crime lawyers, like the prosecution did not prove their case at all. I watched the trial. Now, what the prosecution claims is that Karen Reed backed up, hit John O'Keefe, her boyfriend, with the back of her car, that she backed up at 24 miles an hour, hit him with her car, and then he did some kind of a pirouette and landed 16 feet away on the lawn of the Alberts house, which we think they're the ones who actually did the murder. Now, I would expect the prosecution to bring on a bunch of experts to prove that she did it. Vehicle expert, crash reconstruction expert, medical expert. Um, I would want to see the evidence, but they didn't. They spent like 2 months of interviewing a whole bunch of people to confuse everyone. And the only crash reconstruction expert they showed was one of their own police officers. I forget his name. Cute young guy with an associate's degree who took a accident reconstruction course somewhere along the way. And when he was asked, how can a vehicle back up into someone, first of all, backing up at 24 miles an hour is like pretty impossible. Have you tried it? But anyway, hit someone. So supposedly John O'Keefe had his elbow out with his like a glass in his hand. How can you hit someone in the elbow? Okay, you hit someone in the elbow. This is what this is what the prosecution said. He was hit in the elbow and then he landed 16 feet away. So you hit in the elbow, your elbow doesn't just go in, but it stays attached to your body. It's with such force. You do a pirouette and you land 16 feet away on the grass with your face down, with your phone tucked underneath you very neatly. When the defense asked him how that could happen, he's like, it just did. When the defense asked him what is acceleration, he didn't know. Acceleration is mass times velocity. Even I knew that from physics in college. This guy was a joke. Now, the prosecution could have hired an accident reconstruction specialist, like a real one. I know someone who used to do accident reconstruction for a major company whenever they had deaths. This person had an engineering degree and he saved that company millions of dollars. You have to look at the tire tracks, you have to do like an engineering analysis and try to figure out what happened. But these people didn't do that. Okay, now, unbeknownst to the jury, the FBI had been investigating the Canton Police Department for some time, and they were very also interested in the Karen Reed case, which was, a frame job, a cover-up. And they hired 2 top-level accident reconstruction experts that are hired by the FBI that do work for the National Hockey League. They have PhDs in like biomechanics and all the stuff. And the FBI had a 3,000-page report, which they made available to the prosecution and the defense. Now, obviously, the prosecution didn't call these 2 people because they concluded in their report that the vehicle never hit anyone and that the dead officer was never hit by a vehicle. That's the only evidence you really need. Now, if the prosecution disagreed with these 2 experts, why didn't they get their own expert? Because they knew it was a frame job. Pure and simple, that's all you need to know. The only damage to the vehicle was a broken taillight and someone hit by a car with their arm out, their arm would just go in. And also people hit by cars have bruises, but it's impossible to be hit by a car, do a pirouette, and land 16 feet away. They did the accident reconstruction and they came out with it that car Karen Reed's car did not hit anyone, and Officer O'Keefe was not hit by a vehicle. In fact, he had a big gash on the back of his head and a bunch of what looked like large dog bites on his arm. That's the only evidence you need. The prosecution had no evidence at all. We're going to see the FBI come out with their report, but what I found very interesting, not only that the jury was hung, but that the O'Keefe family, the brother of the killed officer and the mom, believed that Karen Reed did it, because the day after it happened, they just had a hunch. They just didn't like her vibe. And also because their John O'Keefe was found dead on the front lawn of another police officer's house. How could a police officer slay one of his brothers? So what I found very interesting is the cognitive dissonance of this, that they just couldn't believe that, like, their view of the world is so warped, like they actually believe she did it. They actually believe it. They're convinced. And they're very disappointed she wasn't found guilty. And none of the evidence matters to them. They already made up their mind. That's an example of how people are so emotional. I found this very fascinating. It's an example of how people are so emotional that they don't want to look at the evidence. It's the same thing as with Russia and Ukraine. I'm not trying to gaslight anyone here, but I see it the same way, that the NATO expansion, all 1991, Kissinger said, we're not bringing NATO east of Germany when you bring down the Berlin Wall. And then country by country, they kept going, and Russia started saying, we do not want NATO, we do not want your US weapons on our borders. And the US is like, Ukraine can do what it wants, none of your business. But if Russia brought their troops on the Rio Grande, off the coast of Florida, I think we would have a lot to say about that. But again, people are very emotional. So getting back to the Karen Reed case. The other thing that really perplexed me is how much drinking these people do. I like my wine, okay? I'm having some wine right now, okay? I have wine with dinner. I'm having a little wine right now. But I don't get blackout drunk. I don't go out to bars carousing around till midnight or 1 in the morning. And I don't say things that I forget or get in fights. I have my glass of wine. And then when I go to bed, I have a little weed. Maybe these people in Massachusetts should be smoking weed, because all that alcohol is very unhealthy, and it causes them to make a lot of bad decisions. In fact, I found out that Paul O'Keefe, the one who did the interview, hit a man in October of 2020. You can Google it. The police report is online. And caused him to end up in the hospital. He was very drunk. At 4 in the afternoon, he was very drunk. They all seem to have a drinking problem. Karen Reed and her boyfriend, Officer O'Keefe, who is now dead, had a serious drinking problem. They were, I don't know if, she was so drunk that when she found him dead the next morning, she thought, did I do it? I'm so drunk, I don't even have a fucking clue. In fact, apparently her first attorney, just Yannetti, before they brought Alan Jackson on, said it was unintentional. She didn't mean to do it. They thought she did it. She thought she did it. Because she was so fucking drunk. She's in her late 40s. And the officer who died, he was in his 40s, I believe, too, raising his niece's kids. They're almost like parents. They're out getting drunk. The Alberts, they're all out getting drunk, closing down the bar, and then going to a party house. And so when people get really drunk, they make really stupid decisions. So that's the second thing I found. So the first thing I want to say was the cognitive dissonance of just blindly believing, my gut tells me so, I know she did it, completely ignoring the science and the evidence. Number 2, how much drinking these people did. When you get drunk like that, you just make bad decisions. And I think that Officer O'Keefe was a horrible boyfriend to Karen Reed. I think that he used her to babysit the kids. He was very avoidant, and I think it brought out her kind of like anguish even more. So their relationship was probably on the rocks. He was not a good boyfriend. And I don't think either one of them had ever been married, which is kind of also very telling about people who've never been married. Because when you're married, it shows that you have the ability to commit, and also requires you to really work on stuff. When you're married, you have to work on stuff. You learn to compromise, you learn to get along, you learn to not always say things you don't mean, you learn how to face problems, more or less. Let's see, there was one more thing I wanted to say. Okay, and the last thing is that Karen Reed got herself involved with a guy whose family hated her, apparently from the beginning. And then when there was a problem, they weren't on her side, they just turned on her because their allegiance was more to these cops who are the actual killers. And I think it was an accident. I think that when these people accidentally killed John O'Keefe, instead of calling 911, they thought, well, we can't deal with that. We're just going to cover it up. And that there's a lot of corruption. I guess I can also say that people falsely idolize someone that maybe that's been in power. But one interesting thing that Paul O'Keefe did say in the interview today was that the Alberts and McCabe's are his friends, that his sister has known one of them for 10 years, that they really showed up for him after the death, that he really trusted them. So somehow they lured him into their web of lies and deceit, and he just fell for it. There's just no evidence that Karen Reed ever hit him. There's just so much more evidence that she wasn't there that I can't even go into on this video. But I think the accident reconstruction experts hired by the FBI should tell you everything. The day after the mistrial was declared, the state trooper Proctor was relieved of his duties, and he was the lead investigator. But there are going to be more heads rolling. There are going to be more people found guilty. I can't wait for the FBI to come out with their investigation results, because there's a lot of corruption. The other corruption in the Canton Police Department is that of, I think it's Sandra Birchmore, and that might have gotten the investigation started in the beginning because there was a police officer that killed her, but they initially said it was a suicide, but really they have ring camera footage of him walking to her apartment right before, the night before she was found dead, and she was pregnant with his baby. And that was another cover-up that the cops did, but those cops were from another neighboring town, and the girl lived in Canton, so the Canton police kind of helped cover it up. So there is police corruption. We don't really hear about that anymore. We want to believe that the police are good, or that the church people are good, or that Mormons are good, or that our politicians are good. Like, we want to believe that there are good people in charge. But sometimes the people in charge are not good. They're looking out for themselves, just like our politicians are looking out for themselves. They don't care about us. A lot of people think life would be better if Trump would win or Biden would win, but they're just looking out for their own interests. I guess it's hard to see, sometimes we get misled, but it's just interesting to me seeing it right in front of my own eyes, how these people are so convinced that Karen Reed killed their brother, while they have the actual murderer sitting behind them on the day of the closing, and are actually friends with the murderers of the brother and the son, and that they can't even see that these people did the murder. So, but the FBI is on it. There was a grand jury. I mean, already these people have already been questioned by the FBI, so it's not something I'm making up. And I watch a lot of different lawyers on YouTube, and they all have said that the prosecution did not prove her guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. They haven't proved it at all. None of them, they haven't proven how her car could have hit him, or that her car did hit him. Has a broken taillight with nothing else. Come on. But people are so blind to what they want to see that they can't see what's actually happening. I'm sure I've done this myself in the past, or maybe do that now. I don't know how we can be so blind to our own predetermined beliefs that we don't want to see. It's almost like, well, if I see the truth, it's going to shift everything too much in a way I can't handle. I have to believe this. They probably have to believe she did it, because if they were to consider she didn't, it would just be too much for them to handle. Because otherwise they're kind of stupid. Like, the evidence is the evidence. You know, I think they're kind of stupid actually, but you know, that's just my opinion. Again, if you think she did it, I'm going to hide you from the channel, because if you're that stupid, I don't even want you on here. Thanks for watching my video.